Requesting connection. Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Multispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour. To be a part of the program, it's a free call. 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalai. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah show kicks off this hour. 1804 is finally upon us, and man, does it look terrific. I have been kicking the tires on it, playing with it, and had a conversation with Chris, and both of us agree that doing a review right out of the gate is not the best way to do things. Because oftentimes what you find in an initial review is different than what you find doing it 6 months down the road. And so I'm not here to give you my final word on 1804. That's not. I can't do that. I can't tell you that it's ready for production. I don't know. It could be the best distribution Canonical has ever released. It could be the worst distribution Canonical has ever released. But what I can tell you is so far, it looks and feels amazing. Now, full disclaimer, this is not on my main ThinkPad. This is on a spare machine that I am using to test the distro. So I have it's a Dell Latitude. I guess I can't think of the exact model, but it's a Dell Latitude, current specs, current processor, 16 gigs of RAM, very very nice machine. So I'm not testing it inside of a VM. I actually have it on metal, and I did the show prep on it this morning, and I'm using it now, and have been using it for since I got home from Linux Fest last night. One of the things that I have noticed about 1804 is it has cemented itself enough from a spec standard on paper that I want to use it on all of my machines. Now, I won't be using Ubuntu proper. I'm going to go with Kubuntu. And I can't remember if it was Chris that was on the show or Simon that was on the show. One of the last two episodes we talked about this. Everything lands on the LTS. The base operating system, the toolkit, the desktop, everything lands on the LTS. So it might be one of the most stable operating systems, Linux distros that you could use. And again, I'm referring to Kubuntu 1804. When I reload my laptop, I'm going to reload it with Kubuntu. These machines at the studio, they're all getting reloaded with Kubuntu. The newest thing and the first thing that stands out is when you go through the installer, you have this new option that is the minimal install mode. And we used the heck out of that back at JB1. We reloaded a bunch of the machines there, again, all with Kubuntu. So LTS all up the stack. And we used that minimal install, except for once when I forgot. But that minimal install removes a lot of the unwanted, undesired, unneeded software. When you're using a production box, you don't need LibreOffice. A lot of people don't like, well, I shouldn't say a lot of people. There are some people that don't like LibreOffice. A lot of people that don't need it. And so when the operating system, especially software that is available in the repositories, especially in the age of snap installs, there really isn't a lot of reason to pre-install all of this stuff on the computer. Back when we were shipping operating systems on disks, and LibreOffice was a 5-hour commitment to download it, it kind of made sense to ship it on the disk and make it an option to install. Or just install it by default, so people had those tools available to them if they wanted to open it. And certainly for new users, I think it's a great option if you've not used Linux before, or if you're transitioning away from Windows and you want the ability to open that software up, or open those documents, open those files up. I think that the full install is a great option, but I really like the new minimal install. In fact, that is my go-to now anytime I'm reloading a machine. And the interesting thing about the minimal install is it actually contains most of the things that you need anyway. It contains a modern web browser. It contains VLC. It contains a file manager. And I remember one of the first times I built an Arch box, and I had tried to do this thing where I was going to start and I was going to choose everything I wanted to install by hand. And I eventually got there, but it was a bit of a disaster the first couple of weeks, because you have to understand something. When you install Arch, literally nothing comes installed. Nothing. Like even the utilities used to mount and read flash drives. So I was at a client and I went to read, I think it was an extended FAT SD card, something like that, plug it into my laptop, and I can't read it. Now, having used Linux for many, many years, having used that particular laptop for a while, I just assumed the SD card is bad, and I told him so. I said, hey, your SD card is bad. And so he proceeds to put it into his Windows machine, and it loads just fine. Puts it into another Windows machine, and it loads just fine. Then it dawns on me, there's no utility to read the extended FAT partition. And so I had to install it. And it was a great learning experience, which is why anytime somebody ever tells me I want to learn more about computers, I typically will tell them, take a look at Arch or take a look at Gentoo, because they're very good learning experiences. And I personally don't think I would want to use either one of those two in production full time, but it's an excellent learning experience. Other things you'll find with 1804, it comes with GNOME by default. Now, I feel like I owe the GNOME community a bit of an apology. Last week, we took a call from a gentleman. He called up and he said, hey, Noah, I know that you guys don't really like GNOME, and I know that you frequently, bash on it, but and then he went on with the rest of his call, and I defended our my position, I guess, a little bit, and I just said I don't think that's accurate. I don't think that he was referring to Chris and myself. I said I don't think either one of us don't like GNOME. In fact, I would go as far as to say I think it's one of our favorite desktops. But I think that there are some systemic issues with GNOME that prevent us from using it full-time in production. And after I got off the air, I got emails and telegrams and IRC messages, and a bunch of people just said, hey man, I just want to let you know, I feel like I've gotten the same message from you, that you really don't like GNOME, that you talk about GNOME like it's a bad desktop environment or not sufficient desktop environment, and I just want to let you know that caller was pretty much on par with how I feel. And the first 2 or 3 of those messages, I guess I kind of just assume that to a certain degree that there are, some people that will misinterpret things, or there's some people that will read too much into what I say. And this morning I had a conversation with a good friend of mine, who I deeply respect, and I know that he knows me personally, so I know that his interpretation of what I say is on par, probably more than some other listeners. And he reached out to me and he said, I understand where you're coming from, and I understand why you're, defending your position, but I just want to let you know I'm in the boat with those people. I think that you have been too harsh on GNOME. So I just wanted to set the record straight. I think that there are some issues with GNOME. I don't like that everything goes through that single thread. I have fundamentally had to restart my workflow over with GNOME. I'll be in the middle of working on something and I've had to start over because of a GNOME crash. But I acknowledge that it is the most popular desktop environment, bar none. And I also acknowledge that there are more people working on GNOME than almost any other desktop environment. If you listened to the Ask Noah show last week, you heard Simon come on the show. And by the way, Simon's going to be joining us later for a really big announcement. But Simon was there on the show last week, and he said straight up, we've got 2 people. The KDE team, the Ubuntu team, has 2 people to make that are working actively on bugs. Now they have a big marketing side, and of course they have all of the development, team and support and all of that of the KDE project itself. But the actual people that are working on problems on the exact desktop distro that I'm using is 2. So to a certain, and they're 2 very bright people, and they're obviously very capable because they're making a very good desktop, and that works better for my use case than GNOME does. But I think it must be acknowledged that the largest open source company in the United States ships both of their 2 distributions with GNOME. And I think it's worth considering that the largest desktop distribution out there, as of 1804, is shipping with the default desktop environment of GNOME. So that's where the majority of users are. That's where the majority of testing is going to be. And that's likely where a lot of the future of the Linux desktop is going to be. And so to a certain degree, I am bucking that norm by going with Ubuntu. And I'm happy with that. I'm happy with my decision. And I have on this laptop in front of me, or the laptop that my ThinkPad is KDE Neon. Absolutely love it. You know, but at the end of the day, KDE Neon and Ubuntu, they're very similar. And you know, so I had this discussion the past day or so about problems with GNOME and issues with GNOME and where I think the development and future of GNOME is. And one of the things that we kept coming back to is there's a lot of people in the Red Hat and the Fedora community, and they say, I don't have those problems. I've not experienced those issues that you had. Maybe it's an Ubuntu specific thing. Well, I'm here to tell you that I can personally attest that is not the case, because I have not had issues under Fedora, but it is not Ubuntu specific, because I was running Arch and I had the same issues. And the technical details from the people that have actually dug into the issues that we're having, be it the crashes, it doesn't really matter if it happens under X or under Wayland. It's a crash is a crash. They're both bad. The issue is known at a technical level, and that technical issue, that single thread, affects anything that it's running on GNOME. It doesn't matter what the underlying operating system is. And then to add to that, the future issue that we're going to run into, and we have talked about all this on the show, so we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but as when GNOME 4, and there's not been a lot of development on GNOME 4, but when GNOME 4 starts to ship, it is going to fundamentally break all of the extensions. At least to the best of the information that we're being provided now, it's going to break all of the extensions. And that's not a great boat to be sitting in, especially, as we're going to talk about in the rest of the episode, we have some major opportunities here in the Linux desktop sphere. Ubuntu 18.10 is shipping with Wayland, or I'm sorry, is shipping with X instead of Wayland. And I don't think that's any surprise to people that were following closely. We told you here on the Ask Noah show that the speculation was they were going to try to run Wayland, see if it works. If it works, they were going to stick with Wayland. If they ran into a lot of problems, they had the option of falling back for X for the stable LTS. I think that was a great decision. Absolutely awesome. In fact, even my wife, who's, by the way, running 1804 with GNOME, you know, her and I have had a fiery debate about it, and I said, you know, I think you should be using KDE. Because part of it is I like to have the entire house on one distribution. My kids are on Ubuntu, and I said, I think you should give it a shot too. And she tried it for a little bit. It wasn't for her. She said, I just really like GNOME. And I said, well, you know, there's this single thread issue. There's this. And she gave me a good response. She goes, listen, I have been on 1604, and I wrote it until the next LTS came out. And that 1604 worked really well. Unity worked really well for me. And now GNOME is working really well for me. And as long as it's GNOME under X, the crash isn't that bad. It still happens. It's still not a good thing, but I don't lose any work. And I just have faith that Canonical is going to solve the problem one way or another. Either we'll get to the next LTS and we'll transition to Wayland, at which time they'll have a solution for the extensions, or they'll stay on X until they do. But either way, they're not just going to ship a desktop that crashes. That's ridiculous. And that logic, even though on a technical level, I see all of these roadblocks, I know that logic makes sense, that there are people far smarter than me that are going to figure that stuff out. And so I just want to offer my most sincere apology if anybody out there thought I took the position that I don't like GNOME or don't respect GNOME or don't care about the work that GNOME is doing. I think GNOME is a great desktop. I would love to use it. It simply isn't right for me at this time. And so yeah, so that's really all I have to say about the GNOME thing. There's a really cool theme. It's called the community theme. If you think that stock 1804 doesn't look modern enough, or they haven't changed things enough for your liking, there's a really cool theme that you can apply. I have that applied here to my Dell, and it looks really good. They have changed the swap space from a swap partition to just a swap file. And the other thing that I thought was just really, really fantastic is inside of the getting started, in the documentation, inside of Ubuntu 18.04, they've actually included videos. Now, I don't know about you guys, but anytime my refrigerator breaks, anytime that my dishwasher breaks, anytime that my dryer breaks, basically anytime I need to know how to do something, I don't look for written documentation anymore, I look for videos. Partly because I'm lazy, partly because I'm a visual learner. But I want to see how somebody does something. I don't want to read it, and I have a very difficult time visualizing when I read. Part of the reason I listen to a lot of audiobooks. And not only have they produced these videos, they didn't just put them up on YouTube and say, well, here you go, and you can just go search for them. They've actually included them in the official documentation, and that is so fantastic. I think that is such a good idea. I think that is so 2018 of Canonical, so forward-thinking of them, that you're going to have people that fundamentally don't understand how to do this, that, or the other, and are very confused because they've been using Unity for, well, almost 10 years, whatever it's been, 8 years, and 8 years in its current incarnation. And now they have this entirely new desktop where things function entirely differently. The application launcher is at the bottom. The settings are in different places. You do things a lot differently. The window cascading thing can be really off-putting if you've not used GNOME before. The buttons have moved to the other side of the window. And they have these little videos that show you how to get everything kind of set up. And they've done a very good job with them. So bravo to the team that did that. Now, later on this week, we are going to have a video review that is going to follow this episode where we kind of briefly just give you a cursory look at 18.04. Should you upgrade? Yes, you absolutely should. It's working very, very well. Again, so far, we'll give you an in-depth review later on, but I do want to do a video that exemplifies and highlights some of the features and aspects of 18.04 because these people have put a lot of really hard work into it. And overall, even though I have some issues with GNOME, I definitely think it was the right decision. Even now, I still think it was the right decision to ship with the world's most popular desktop distribution. Knowing what I know about the problems about GNOME, I still think it was the right decision to participate in the success of a desktop environment that literally every other distro is centering around. I think that's the way that we get a very cohesive, very user-friendly desktop environment. Again, phone lines this hour, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Make your voice heard, become a part of the program. Simon Quigley is our Director of Operations here at Altispeed Technologies. He's also the release manager for the Lubuntu project, and had a chance to catch up with him, and we sat up till wee hours of the night and had a big, long, in-depth discussion about some of the upcoming projects at Altispeed and some of the cool things that he is doing. And he recently made a decision, and as we were talking about it, I said, man, you got to come on the Ask Noah Show and talk about that, because that is so cool. So joining us again for the second week in a row is Mr. Simon Quigley. Hey, Simon, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So I understand, if Twitter is to be believed, that you have some cool news coming up on for the Lubuntu project.
Yeah, so with the past releases, we've always said we wanted to switch to LXQt. So LXQt, it's the Qt 5 port of LXDE, and this release we're finally making the jump and saying we are switching to LXQt for a fact.
That's awesome, and that is big news. Let's back up for a little bit for those that don't speak developer. What is a toolkit? What does it do? And what toolkit was Lubuntu using before you guys decided to switch to LXQt?
So the toolkit is the library, the core piece of software that comprises applications that you use. So it's things like your file manager, or different pieces of software you may use, like your web browser. All of that has common components, and the toolkit that Lubuntu used with LXDE is GTK2 with some GTK3 applications. So GTK is the, I forget the acronym, but it's the GNOME toolkit. So it's what GNOME uses with their desktop environment, and it's what their applications use. But it's a very, very popular toolkit for the desktop in the Linux world.
I guess I always thought that GTK stood for GNOME toolkit. Maybe, right? I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: what are the advantages of LXDE over the previous toolkit? So I don't know if you said it on the air, if this is what you and I were talking about, but you said that it was based on LXDE and GTK2. So why make the switch? Why now?
So GTK2 is losing support fast. We're seeing people wanting to migrate off of GTK2. It's losing a lot of support. And quite frankly, LXDE's development has slowed down and pretty much stopped at this point, except for like the Raspberry Pi people, who I think have forked it at this point. So at this point, the move to Qt was done because Qt is a little bit more. I'm going to be careful with my wording here because I don't want to have people write in the show, but Qt is a little bit more easier to develop with. It's a little bit more stable for, in my use case with it. Qt is, well, for people who don't know, Qt is actually the toolkit primarily used by back in the day it was used by KDE people primarily, but now it's used by an increasing number of desktop environments. So I think Budgie's moving towards it, and now LXQt is moving towards it. And since an increasing amount of people are using it, we thought it was a good idea to sort of move with that. So
now you said that there was a lot of people that were in the Lubuntu community that have wanted to do this for a long time, or at least had wanted to have the discussion for a long time. So this decision is pretty big, yeah?
Definitely, because we've been saying we want to do this. I think we made the official announcement of the project in the 14.10 cycle, so we're talking late 2014 here.
Okay.
So, I mean, I became the Lubuntu release manager in early 2017. So we've had the LTS release. We couldn't do it right before the LTS release because I personally had a fear that it wouldn't be completely polished enough, and of course you have to keep the LTS pristine, polished, and stable, because that's what people expect of an LTS. So I think this is the right opportunity now to finally make the switch, because around the 1610 cycle, 1704 cycle, when it would have been an ideal time to switch before the 1804 cycle, it wasn't quite ready yet. But now is the time I think we're going to make the switch, because we just shipped an LTS that has 3 years of support, so you can depend on the LTS. You have LXDE, you have everything that you're used to, but going forward, our main development, so non-bug fix development, which Lubuntu will still receive bug fixes. Don't get us wrong there. We will still submit bug fixes and we will still work on it. But the goal here is to put our major development in polishing Lubuntu. Well, it used to be called Lubuntu Next. We called it that. I think we had initial images in the 1704 cycle, I want to say. And from there, now this will be called Lubuntu, and then going forward, we will refer to what is now Lubuntu as Lubuntu Classic.
Okay, so break that down for a little bit. Does this have anything to do with the naming schema that has changed from Canonical over the past couple of years? So, for example, you started with Kubuntu and Lubuntu and Xubuntu and Ubuntu for Ubuntu proper, and now what you're seeing is them going to things a naming scheme of Ubuntu GNOME, Ubuntu Mate, Ubuntu Budgie. Is that related?
Not really. I think I remember when we first were starting to make the change. I think I saw what personally inspired me to call it Lubuntu Next was I think I saw something in the tooling about Ubuntu Next. So I think that I could be wrong on this, so don't quote me on it, but I think that was Ubuntu with Unity 8. So I sort of followed the naming scheme because it makes sense. It's the next iteration of what will be Lubuntu. So I don't really think it was inspired by that, because as of now, new flavors can only have that 2-word convention. Flavors can't have that, just letter before the Ubuntu name, but definitely it was unrelated to that.
Okay. So do you have something against GTK? Is there something that you don't like? And I mean, I understand that that's a difficult question. I understand that's kind of a jerk question to ask you, especially after I just got done apologizing to the GNOME folks, but I just want an honest answer. I mean, is there a technical reason why so many projects and so many things are moving away from the GNOME toolkit and moving towards LXDE? LXQt, sorry.
Yeah. I as you said, it's a little bit of a difficult question because GTK is a fine toolkit. It does the job well. But I find talking with people, talking with my artwork team, talking with whoever, it seems that GNOME breaks up, well, the GNOME Toolkit breaks things on updates more frequently than Qt does. So if you have an update to a Qt framework, you won't really see a lot of breaking changes in between releases, as in the same way that you would see themes breaking and extensions breaking and whatever else breaking in between GNOME releases and GTK releases. So I guess I look at it towards being more stable. Plus, with Qt, you have in my experience as a developer, it's just been a little bit easier. Of course, that's subjective. Of course, somebody's going to say, oh, well, GTK is just much easier for me. And, I can respect that because we all have certain things that we're familiar with. I find myself more familiar with Qt than GTK, but I guess Qt seems to be a little bit more stable to me, and it seems to be where there's a lot of active development, and, projects that I really respect use it. So, things like KDE, Budgie's moving towards it, that sort of thing. I think it's the right decision going forward, especially because upstream development has turned towards LXQt. Well, just about that real quick, if I can go on a little tangent. Originally, the plan was to go right from LXD to LXQt and leave LXD behind, but LXD still receives minor bug fixes and sometimes, give or take, one new feature here or there, but it's really nothing compared to what's going on in LXQt right now. So I think it's the right decision going forward. It's more active upstream, and it's just, in my opinion, it's an easier toolkit to develop with.
So it's interesting you talk about how many different projects are moving towards LXQt, and indeed I have seen the exact same thing. As I look out and as I talk to other people that are in the Linux desktop world, a lot of the other desktops, obviously not GNOME, but a lot of the other desktops are moving that direction. Do you see LXQt as the future of the Linux desktop? Do you see that as where developers, if they're coming in today and starting to work on something and they don't have any predefined beliefs, was that the direction that Linux is moving?
Meaning towards Qt or LXQt specifically?
No, Qt specifically, I suppose.
I think that it's certainly appealing. Sometimes more than GTK. I guess both of them have their use cases. I would say that, but I also think that with Qt you have advantages like cross-platform. You have advantages like, like I said, backing by KDE. You have many different advantages. Even some little advantages that, they're trivial enough, but I guess I would personally say yes, Qt is where new Linux developers should be looking if they want to develop on Linux. So,
how about for the art theming, the API stability, stuff like that?
Still, I would sort of say Qt is a little bit more stable. I'm not saying Qt is perfect. I just, let's make that clear, but I do think that Qt, in that respect, is a lot more mature. So,
you said earlier that the LTE, you're going to get support for 3 years. Is Lubuntu on a different LTS support cycle than Ubuntu proper?
Sure. So let me actually explain that, because it's an interesting thing that I see people sort of get and sort of say inaccurately all the time. So Canonical, as a company, they support Ubuntu Desktop and Ubuntu Server for 5 years. The Ubuntu release team and the technical board, they recommend that for flavors, because I should step back a little bit, because in Ubuntu, it's the packages are split into different sections. So what gets support by the security team and, well, the Canonical hired security team is different than the section that flavors are in, that all the packages that they are in. So I guess it's they recommend that 3-year support is what you choose, because flavors sometimes can be a little bit of a more fast-paced cycle. But of course, Canonical has corporate partners, and they need that 5-year thing. So I guess the short of it is, flavors typically go with 3 years of support. Canonical supported things that they might have corporate partners that rely on it. It will go with 5 years of support, and then from there, there's no certain time on how long the extended support that they do lasts. I've heard 18 months. I'm not sure, but that goes on from there. But they support that commercially.
When does work start on the LXQt, I guess, migration? When can people start? When can people expect to start kind of playing with it? And if they're okay being in between the LTS, if they're okay with a daily build, when can we expect the first release of Lubuntu with LXQt?
So we've had Lubuntu Next builds for, like I said, a release or two now. We just haven't formally released them, and so you could right now grab an ISO, but I will have to admit that it's been on the back burner a little bit. So things might not be as polished. So you can grab the dailies right now. There's some polish that needs to be required, but we will release Lubuntu only with LXQt in the 1810 release, and well, with the 1810 release, we know right now that it's named that the adjective is cosmic. We don't know the animal name yet, but we know it's cosmic. So the cosmic release will have LXQt, but as soon as images start going for that, which within the next month, I want to say, give or take, there's no really certain time, those will be available.
Certainly a lot of people are using Lubuntu because they like the technical advantages that Lubuntu has, the performance that Lubuntu has, and certainly, you know, when you see people skating to where the puck is going to be, like going to these newer toolkits and the toolkits that are accepted by a large number of distros, that is an appealing aspect. But what about the people that want to run Lubuntu on older computers? Typically, you'll see a lot of community members say, I have a 10-year-old computer, a 15-year-old computer, a 20-year-old computer. What distro should I use? And Lubuntu has always been kind of that safe bet because it's such a low overhead desktop on top of a very current and modern Ubuntu base. You can run modern software, but not eat up a lot of resources. Is this change going to affect that?
So the changes I've seen between LXD and LXQt are in the tens of megabytes, so not much. But you have to sort of think. Computers 10 years ago aren't what they used to be. We're seeing machines with at least a gig or two of RAM. That sort of thing. Of course, Lubuntu going forward, we will try to stay lighter, and we will try to stay more efficient. But of course, as we move forward, there will be a slight increase in resources. Like I said, I'm not saying that it's going to drastically change and we're going to become a really, really heavy bloated distro, but of course, we're going to ship applications that are going to be frequently used by people, so LibreOffice, that sort of thing. And we're keeping up with that, but as a side effect, LXQt is extremely light. So the short answer to that is no. That won't really change.
You've told me before, personally, I don't know if we've ever talked about it on the air, but you've told me personally that what originally got you into Lubuntu, the reason that you're a Lubuntu user today, was because you could use it on older hardware. So I guess my follow-up question is, if there was ever a decision to be made as the release manager, you're obviously going to put a lot of emphasis on the ability for people to run on older machines. Do I understand that correctly?
Yep, absolutely.
How about the actual messaging of Lubuntu? Is that what Lubuntu is designed for? When you ask people, they say, well, Lubuntu proper is just for general, Linux for human beings. That's what Ubuntu is. When people start asking, what is the purpose of the LXDE desktop on top of Ubuntu proper, what do you tell them the prescribed purpose of the Lubuntu distro is?
So nowadays, the thing with Lubuntu is lightweight is a meme, but I won't say that. But Lubuntu is for the elevator pitches. Lubuntu is for older resource computers or for computers that just want something quicker running on it. It's a very, very efficient operating system that takes advantage of, we don't have like an elevator pitch like Linux for human beings, stuff like that, but it is definitely a lighter distro. Definitely is something that it can run on older hardware, but it also makes new machines fly. If you get what I mean there.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I know that we can't talk about this in great detail coming on the show tonight, but coming up in the next couple of weeks, there's another big announcement that's going to become public about Lubuntu. The details are not finalized, so I suppose it could fall through the floor at the last minute. But all of that lead up to say we're going to start looking at Lubuntu, or people could start looking at Lubuntu as a daily driver desktop distribution that is there to solve your problems, that can work and that you can rely on as a workstation quality OS or a desktop quality OS. It's not just for I want to repurpose that old computer in the back for grandma to browse the internet.
Yeah, so it's definitely going to be interesting going forward with that because LXQt is certainly, I think, the way to go with that. So,
all right, Simon Quigley, T Simon, is it? Let's see here. What exactly is it? T Simon Q2 on Twitter. Director of Operations at Altispeed, release manager for the Lubuntu team, and frequent contributor and sometimes call screener on the Ask Noah Show. Thanks for joining us, Simon. We appreciate having you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. Again, phone lines are open, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live at AskNoahShow.com. Kyle joins us this hour. Hey, Kyle, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hi. I was just calling in. I've been working on a little pet project in a virtual machine off on the side, creating, I wouldn't call it my own distro, but, just kind of experimenting with my own desktop and stuff using
Sure.
OpenBox. And I'm using Alpine Linux as the base.
Okay.
I downloaded it, and it's doing great. It's really light, and that's kind of what I was going for. I was going to try to build something for this really old, like 15, 20-year-old computer.
Wow.
In my grandfather's basement. And I wanted to build my own little UI, but I've run into some problems starting an X server. It won't let me do it, and I haven't been able to find anything online on how, unless I install XFCE and then don't use it.
Okay.
There's all the XFCE programs, and all their stuff is still there. I want to see if I can get, and I tried just deleting it after I got everything up and running, and then everything broke.
Okay. So let me step through this with you just a little bit so I make sure I understand. So you want X server on there, but you don't want the LX, or you don't want XFCE, the desktop. What desktop environment do you intend to use, if any?
Well, like I said, I'm using OpenBox and programs as just kind of a pet project to make my own thing.
Right. I'm sorry. You did tell me that. I'm sorry. And so what is there any output, any error message that pops up when X server fails to start?
Yeah, it says no screens found, but I've looked online and nobody seems to be having the same problem as me. I've tried all of the different solutions that I found on forums, and number one, none of them are running Alpine Linux, and it's almost all Ubuntu or Arch. And two, I tried it anyway, and it just didn't work.
Okay, I'll be honest with you. I definitely am not a developer of desktop environments or anything like that. So my ability to troubleshoot them is probably a little bit limited. Have you run the command reconfigure? What is it? Reconfigure.
OpenBox or no.
It should be. Yeah. It's like xorg-server. Let me see if I look it up here. There's a command that you can run that
in -configure.
Yes, right. Yes, yes. Reconfigure xserver-xorg. Have you tried running that?
Yeah, and that was one of the solutions, and it's still coming up the same error unless I install XFCE. And what I tried to do is just remove individual components from XFCE to see if that would work, and I could just keep whatever's making it work. But Alpine Linux, I guess it's an Alpine Linux problem, is trying to save me from deleting a dependency that would make it stop working, even though that's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Chat room suggests perhaps maybe it's an issue with the video card. Maybe Xorg is too new for the video card. Do you happen to know what video card is in it? Is it a dedicated discrete graphics? Is it dedicated graphics? Is it integrated?
It would be integrated, but I'm running it in a virtual machine right now, so I don't know if that would change things.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I don't know. I'm so sorry. Yeah, here's one thing you could do if we want to continue troubleshooting this. The way to continue, Kyle, is to export the contents of xorg.conf, so /etsy/x11/xorg.conf. Spit out the output of that, and if you could send it to me in an email, live@asknoahshow.com, I will include that config in the show notes, and I'll link to it, and we'll see if anybody in the community has an idea of what exactly is causing that problem with Xorg. Unfortunately, I'm not qualified to answer that question. I've not quite dug in quite that deeply to desktop environments. One thing you might consider, and I don't know if this would actually work for you or not, because again, I'm kind of outside of my purview here, but one thing you might consider is installing a desktop environment so that you have a working X server and then just not using it. Just let the file sit there while you build, your own thing on the side. And then once you get your thing working, then you can slowly start to try to remove and replace the working components of the desktop. And give me a call back if you would, and let me know how that works out. And if we don't find an answer for you, then give me a call back and let me know that too, because I'd like to keep track of that. It's an interesting problem. Jim is calling from Virginia. Hey, Jim, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hi, Noah. Welcome back from the left coast.
Yeah, yeah, it was that for sure. It was quite the trip.
We are glad that you spend so much time out there at JB. Appreciate all your participation there and going to Linux Fest Northwest.
I really appreciate your support.
Said, I have a problem. Well, you're the one who's doing the supporting. We're just here cheering in the stands. So
appreciate it, sir. How can we help today?
I made the bold decision to update my wife's Lenovo X201 to Ubuntu Mate 1804 on the day of release. And because normally I can do that without a problem. I've been running the beta on some of my own machines. That's been fine. Everything went well with the install, and now when I come up to the login screen, I log in, and nothing happens. No error message. It just goes blank, and then it comes back to the login screen. I'm making the assumption, but it could be a wrong one, that because I've split it up so there's a root partition, there's a home partition, and there's a swap area. And the home area is encrypted, and I'm assuming that somehow in the install where I didn't overwrite that, but I said this is home, just don't format it, that I missed a step or there's some problem. And I'm wondering if it is an encrypted drive problem, what I can do to get around that. I mean, I can always boot from another USB drive and find out what the encryption passphrase is, but I'm just wondering if you've run into that before. I've done this on changing from one Ubuntu derivative to another, haven't had this problem up to this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if it was encrypted, the key definitely could have changed. So that definitely is a possibility. As far
even though I didn't allow it to, I see. Even though I didn't allow it to overwrite or format or anything like that.
Well, right, but if you didn't, let me think about this now. If you didn't allow it to format, then then you would be using your old encryption key, right? You'd be using the old encryption key from the old home directory.
Okay.
So assuming that it's encrypted with Lux, which I assume it is if it's just a little checkbox, if you were to take a flash drive and boot into a environment, you should see that directory pop up. And if you click on it, Lux should prompt you to decrypt that directory, which would allow you to, if nothing else, pull all the data off of it. But what you should be able to do is, and again, I'm trying to think very carefully while I'm on the air here with you and visualize this. You said you have a separate partition for the home directory, right? So
that's right, and that's what would be encrypted.
Yeah. So what one could do is copy the data out of the home directory, then inside of the new but you can't log into the new installation, so you wouldn't be able to use any of the graphical tools there. So what you could try doing is remove all of the data out of the home directory, back that up to an external hard drive somewhere off the system, remove the home directory entirely, and when you boot into the new system, you would have to create a new user because the home directory for that existing user won't be there. And interestingly enough, Jim, we tried this, deleting the home directory at JB1 in one of the systems, and I can tell we thought it might just regenerate all of the files necessary to work, and it definitely does not. But so what you could do is you could drop to a command shell, so Control Alt F1, and create a temporary user, so user space add space Jim temp, and then a set of passwords, so PASSWD, and then a space, and then what you want the password, and then the username, so Jim temp, press enter, make up a password. And that should allow you to at least log in to the system. Then once you're there, by default, Jim temp is going to get created in the root directory /home/Jim temp or whatever. Once you're able to log into the system, at that point, you should then be able to go and create a new user and set that user back and set that user's home directory back up on the partition that you've created within GNOME disks inside of your new 1804 installation. Do you follow that? And I can write that all up in a step-by-step too.
That wouldn't hurt to have it in writing.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that for you,
If
Jim.
all else fails, the home drive, the home partition is backed up. So, but rather than go to that first and learn nothing, I wanted to see if I could do it the less straightforward way.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And good on you for backing that up.
Fails, oh yeah, I've been married for 46 years, and that's one of the reasons why is we don't lose data around here.
That's awesome. My wife might be listening to this, and I might be in trouble when I get home for a certain incident that may or may not have occurred 6 months ago. But give that a shot, Jim. And the other thing that you might try if all else fails, just short of the nuclear option. You could try running something like sudo apt-get install space tac reinstall gnome-shell, which will wipe away GNOME and then put GNOME on there. So Chatroom was pointing out there's sometimes an issue with the .xauthority file that's inside of GNOME, and that prevents the GUI login sometimes. So if you simply just entirely blow away GNOME, you'll for sure lose all of the stuff that's in there. It sounds like all of that's backed up, and it would save you from having to start the whole installation. Personally, if it's my machine, I'd probably just nuke and pave. It'll be really clean. It'll be really straightforward. It'll work. And if there ever was a time to nuke and pave something, it would be when you're switching desktop environments. I mean, especially if you're going from an LTS to an LTS, you're going from 1604 to 1804. That would be the time to do it. Again, phone lines are open. 1-855-450-NOAA, 855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. OMG, ubuntu.co.uk headline: Google just forked a popular GTK theme. Rumor is that desktop Linux apps are coming to Chromebooks, and when they do, they may look rather familiar, like Adapta GTK theme familiar. Reports earlier in the year reveal plans Google has to add Linux virtual machine supports in Chrome OS via LXD containers. We speculated at the time that we could allow end users to run desktop apps in Chromebooks without resorting to existing Crouton-based hybrid OS solutions. Recent code commits revealed that Google is working on a fork of the adapted GTK theme. A few months on from those early vague leaks, and the whole Linux app on Chromebooks thing, which Google code names Crostini, is in full bloom. A native terminal app has started showing up on some Chrome OS users already. If you're intrigued by all of this Crostini stuff, an excellent place to try to stay up to date and track all of these things is the Crostini subreddit. This is where most of the news, code spots, and leaks about the efforts originate. Still, if Crostini was a developer-specific tool, a way to get Android Studio or on Chromebooks, or even just a CLI-based setup, then surely Google wouldn't as fussed about aesthetics to fork a GTK theme to start developing it. A Chromebook that can run Android apps, progressive web apps, and desktop Linux apps, that's a really compelling lure. So, a couple of things on this. First, of course, we're going to have that subreddit linked for you in the show notes, so you should keep an eye on that. Google seems to be taking Chromebooks to an entirely new level. We watched as Chromebooks really rose to prominence when the Acer I think it was a C920 or C20 or something like that. When that laptop came out, It was the most popular laptop sold on Amazon for like 9 straight months because everybody wanted a $200 computer that could check email, browse the internet, watch YouTube, all of the basic things that we all do. That fits a Chromebook user. And what Google has seen is that there is a developer market, and these developers are looking for computers that they can use reliably to get their work done. And Google watched these developers buy Chromebooks, and I see them all the time at Linux Fest. I mean, just scattered about at Linux Fest. They're not running Chrome OS. They're running either Crouton or they've entirely flashed it. Now, a little pro tip. If you entirely wipe the OS off of a Chromebook, there is a small little thing that can bite you. There is a flag. It's called the read-write flag. You must turn the read-write flag off so that the drive is not write protected from writing a new operating system to it. In some models of Chromebooks, if the battery completely goes dead, like all the way to 0, in other words, it died and then you left it sit in the computer bag too long, that read-write flag automatically turns back on, and when the computer goes to boot up, it realizes that it doesn't have Chrome OS, and so it won't boot an unsigned operating system, and so the system just won't boot. And then you're semi-hosed because you can't boot your existing Linux installation and Chrome OS no longer exists. So the only option is to reinstall Chrome OS, return that flag on, and then reinstall your entire Linux OS. So Crouton by far is the safer way to go because you can just turn that flag back off then if you run into trouble. And that's what a lot of developers are doing. That's what a lot of people are doing. And so what you are watching on one side is Apple is moving away from the desktop and laptop infrastructure. As they made their announcements in 2020, they're going to move away from x64 processors. They're going to go to ARM-based processors. And for Apple's business model, getting everything on iOS, one code base, we've talked about that on the show. That'll probably be a very profitable venture for them. But it leaves developers in a tight spot because developers are doing one of 3 things. They are either SSHing into a more powerful Linux workstation to get their work done. They are running those applications locally on their machine, or they are virtualizing them. Now, in the case of option A, SSHing into a more powerful machine, it is far more efficient and far more cost-effective to just use a Chromebook. There's less overhead in the the client-side operating system. There's less money involved, and everything's fast because you can afford, because there's no like local storage to speak of. You can run basically everything on RAM sticks essentially. So that's a really compelling option to a lot of developers, is to SSH in, and that's the way that places like Google are doing a lot of this. Option B is they're running the code locally. Well, if you have a different processor system, then that no longer works. And there are minor differences between Nginx on ARM and Nginx on x64. And so if you're trying to run local copies of all of these softwares and you can't track version numbers exactly, you can't run the exact version number, that's an off-put to developers. And then there's the third way, which is virtualization. Well, if you go to ARM, you still have all of the servers are running x64, and you can't really virtualize a separate instruction set because it becomes too slow. So for all of those reasons, there is no good way, if Apple continues on this path, and again, I will be the first to admit that they have said this is their plan. That does not mean it's locked in stone. They could pull the plug at the 11th hour. I don't think they will, but they could pull the plug at the 11th hour. So they are moving towards mobile. They are moving towards iOS. They want to have commercials with little girls sitting on the lawn that don't know what computers are. That's Apple's vision of computers. Then you have Microsoft on the other hand. And Microsoft continues to not see a lot of reinvestment into the Windows infrastructure. People are moving away from it. People do not have a lot of respect for Windows. There's not a lot of hype and excitement around Windows. Certainly there is a plethora of security issues and stability issues on Windows. And so you have the Windows market and Microsoft itself trying to transition and move itself into the cloud and things like Azure. And as you watch what's happening as these companies do these things, Microsoft becomes more and more successful. Every time they do something in Azure and offer something as a cloud-based service, people eat it up. And people continue to not really understand the mess that is Windows 10. People continue to buy iPads and iPhones. People continue to not buy, at least in any large number that represents more than 10% of the desktop infrastructure, Macs. Now, Google is already successful in both the cloud and mobile. Google was probably the forefront runner in cloud. Google probably had more cloud than any other company when they started. They dominate the cloud. I mean, they're a search engine, right? That's where they make all of the vast majority of their money. People think of cloud, they immediately associate it with Google. When you think of cloud-based mail, you're thinking Gmail. And indeed, many companies that want to use mail, if it's cloud-based, if it's hosted, they're probably doing it in Gmail. And on the mobile side, Android has like 85% dominance worldwide. Now, we don't see that so much here in the US because, you know, the US pocketbooks tend to be a little bit thicker, and because Apple has a heavy presence here, it's kind of a split. But you go worldwide, it's very heavy Android, baby. And all of these embedded devices, all of these displays and screens and kiosks and all that, those are all on Android. So I think it's safe to say that Google has won on the Android front. I think it's safe to say that Google has won on the cloud front. I think it's safe to say that Apple is winning on the mobile front and continues to win on the mobile front. And I think it's fair to say that Microsoft is winning on the cloud front, at least for the thing that they are intending to do. So that leaves the desktop. Now, again, Apple, not a lot of growth on the desktop. You still see primarily Windows machines, if I'm being honest. Not a lot of growth there. And you have Microsoft, which is losing desktop users, and the desktop market share in and of itself is shrinking. So they're not focused on it. They're not putting a lot of money in there. But Google is the third wheel. Google is the company that has more and more resources every single day, and they've already dominated two of the existing platforms. What would be wrong? What would be the problem? What's stopping Google for making a serious attempt to dominate the desktop? And all of this comes at exactly the right time, because right now you have more people than ever interested in Linux. You have developers who have a need for a machine backed by a large company that can work really well. But the question I have to ask, the question that everybody is asking is, can we accept that Google might be necessary to make the Linux desktop successful? And if we accept that, is that something we can live with? Can we live in a world where Google makes the Linux desktop, where you can go into Best Buy and buy a subsidized, very nice hardware computer? If you've looked at the Pixelbook, and I have the original Pixel, it is a fantastic machine. I have a new, it's not made by Google, but I think it's an HP, a new Chromebook. After this news broke, I had to order one. I needed one that had USB-C so I could play with it. If you're that person, if you like Linux, and you want to be able to just walk into a store and buy a machine that quote unquote works, you know, if you're the Mac user that you know, you don't have any operating system allegiance, you just need a computer that works, you need to be able to do your development work on, and Google is going to give it to you. And by the way, they're going to give it to you at a great price compared to what you were paying for that MacBook. And then you start to see these manufacturers, instead of Chromebooks becoming these $200 or $300 machines, maybe that's the entry-level ones, but maybe we get some more Pixelbooks and some more people competing in that realm. I know Dell has started to. Maybe we get to a world where you can buy a Linux desktop that can run native Linux applications in a store with a 2-year warranty for a decent price on great hardware, backed by a large multi-billion-dollar company. Is that something we can live with? I don't know. If you have an opinion on it, give me a call, 855-450-6624. Send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. But I'm really interested in this. I'm really interested to see where this goes. I really think this has the ability to move Linux forward if we play our cards right. Now, I also think there's a bright, bright future for Ubuntu and Ubuntu 18.04. I would not at all put it past Google to look up and say, hey, guess what, guys? We're trying to maintain this other version of Linux or whatever. I'm not sure that we really need to do that. I think we could probably just go to something like Ubuntu. And then we can provide not only you're not just talking about developers that are developing PC apps. Maybe these are maybe these developers are developing things like Android apps right on their machines. I don't know. Time will tell. We here at the Ask Noah Show will continue to follow it as always and bring you updates as they come. Hey, did you guys know that this show is available as a downloadable podcast? That's right. To subscribe to the show or download the latest episode, visit podcast.asknoahshow. You can get the latest episode, and of course, follow us on Twitter at AskNoahShow. The Ask Noah Show continues next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. A huge thanks to VoxTelSys for providing our phone systems, Ben, our producers, Sarah, our call screener, and Chris Fisher, owner and operator of Jupiter Broadcasting. This hour of the show may be over, but there's plenty more content for you 24/7 at AskNoahShow.com.